Coming up on this episode of Off the Fence, myself, Barry and Tony do a deep dive on the champion hurdle. Is it as simple as Honeysuckle winning, or who and what are the alternative options? We also look back at Newbury and Warwick, and we look ahead at Ascot too, and of course there's tracker time. Hello and welcome to Off the Fence. This is your go-to jumps digital programme from right now all the way through the season and all the way to the Cheltenham Festival. We dissect all the big performances from the week just been, and we also look ahead, but you guys all know the drill by now. Thank you very much for watching as always. Before we go any further, please hit subscribe on our YouTube channel so you don't miss a single episode of Off the Fence over the coming weeks, and you won't want to because, of course, now things really hot up ahead of the Cheltenham Festival. This week and every week, I'm joined by Barry Geraghty and Tony Keenan. Quick check-in with them. Tony, how are you this week?
Yeah, all good. I know we'd no Dublin Racing Festival the past weekend, but I thought the racing was pretty decent, probably more so focused on England. But yeah, it held up pretty well, some interesting performances.
Good. And Barry, did you go racing at all over the last 7 days?
No, I haven't been racing, no, but I enjoyed watching Newbury, especially at the weekend. It was great action and plenty to take of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And on that note, let's crack straight on with a look back at what happened where. And as Tony and Barry have just touched upon there, Newbury is our first point of call. Bravemansgame, running in a handicap, brave campaigning from Paul Nichols's team has been applauded by many in the media and in the public as well. It was great to see him. He had to give lumps of weight away and he defied a bad run of form for the stable to win. Barry, what were your main takeaways from his performance at the weekend? And what did we learn about Bravemansgame?
It was a very good performance, but for me the bravest part was just running him with the way some of his horses are running. So he overcame that. He did everything brilliantly. I thought he was very clever at the cross fence, the one before the straight. Put in a short one at the fourth last and was probably the first resemblance of a mistake we've seen him make. But very good over the last three and gave them a lot of air. So it was a good performance. Interesting, Harry Cobden was quick to point out afterwards on his interview that he'd rather take a lead. And I think the stronger the pace, the better for him. He was possibly caught for pace last year in the Ballymore over 2.5. I think he's a real good stayer. Obviously jumps brilliantly, but the stronger they go, the better for him. And it would probably be important for him that a high senior does go to Cheltenham, because I think he's going to add the pace. If Gallop in the Champ does go here, I'm sure he's going to want to follow with him, Willie Mullins will and Paul Townend. So they'll be happy to follow Bravemansgame maybe. But I think the better the Gallop, the better for Bravemansgame.
Yeah, very interesting. And just touching upon that Harry Cobden interview immediately after the race, did you pick up a sense of, I wonder if there was a sense of disappointment there? I didn't quite think his reaction matched the performance in a way. Did you feel that way at all, Barry?
You could say that. I think he gave him a squeeze at the fourth last, and Harry was looking for maybe more than he should have been, and he did say that afterwards. But the horse, what really impressed me over the last three was the air he gave, the height he gave his fence. He jumped so clean and so well. Ground wasn't bad. He had to do his own work. I wouldn't be disappointed with him, but I think it just does point to him being a proper stayer and maybe vulnerable to a speed horse.
Okay, so final point and on him. If Gallopin des Champs tips up, and as you say, Ahoy Senior does too, hopefully, and injects a bit of pace and front-running speed into this sort of race, would you be with or against Bravemansgame in the Brown Advisory, Barry?
I do like him. I think he's a very good horse, but there is a wow factor potentially with Gallopin des Champs, and he just could have that little kick to go and beat the two of them.
Okay. Fair, I'll take that. Let's stick with the novice chasers, but move over to Warwick, Barry, and focus in on Edwardstone. Put in another good performance ahead of his Arkle bid, and third time lucky, very disappointing. I personally don't know if that was the real third time lucky. What was your view on the race?
You could say that it was 14 days after his Doncaster win, where he travelled brilliantly and he did everything really well that day. Now, it was a step up in grade, but it might have just come a week too soon for him. But take nothing away from the winner. I thought it was a really good performance. You know, for me, he's a horse who I always felt might be just stretched at the top level over 2 mile, but he showed great pace in Warwick, and I thought he was brilliant and quick over the last two. And the winning and the losing of the race was possibly the second last. the speed he went at it, and he flew it, landed running, was gone. We're third time lucky, got in tight, lost a bit of momentum, and I think the winner just got away from him. So I was really impressed with Edwardstone. I think he's a very smart horse, and he is a worthy favourite for the Arkle. But it looks a wide open race with Blue Lord, Riviere de Tel, Saint Sam, lots of horses with chances. But I think that Edwardstone is the right favourite.
Okay, well, Edwardstone is currently the 2-1 favourite ahead of all those horses Barry's just mentioned, Tony. Would you agree with Barry that he's the worthy favourite after that performance?
Yes, I think so. It's interesting what you pick up though in third time lucky. Like I remember Dan Skelton said after his win at Doncaster he'd had a small overreach. I thought that was very surprising that he was back out so quickly.
Because that was where I was so confused after Doncaster, because I was there and that kind of was mentioned, and then it was all a bit of a panic about, will we get him to Cheltenham? And then 2 weeks later he's at Warwick. It was a bit confusing, but anyway, continue. Sorry, Tony.
No, you're fine. I also thought it was quite strange. Maybe they're trying to find out where they stood with Edwardstone, because if they couldn't match him or at least get close to him, there wasn't very much point in going for the Arkle. So now I think it's probably more likely to wait for entry. No, I've liked Edwardstone all season. He's built up a lot of experience. Jumps well. I think as was pointed out by a good fella there on Twitter today, Tony Deacon, his record just when he comes up against Irish horses wouldn't be great. Very good competing against English horses, but that's over hurdles, so he does look to improve over fences. Very good jumper. And of the three Irish horses at the top of the market, like Blue Lord didn't cut it in Grade 1 novice hurdles last year. Saint Sam was similar. I think in the spring juvenile it was close as he got. Riviere the Tel was only running in the Fred Winter, so like Barry says, it is wide open. The two I would have in my mind is Edwardstone and I think we talked to him last week. I think Saint Sam, if his size doesn't count against him, wouldn't be that surprised if he came out on top of the three from the Irish Arkle in the real thing.
Okay, no positive mentions for the mare Riviere de Tel, but it's a wide open race now. Let's move on back to Newbury, Barry, and focus in on Eldorado Allen winning the Denman Chase, and now might head to the Ryanair, might miss Cheltenham, might be supplemented for a Gold Cup. He seems to have loads of options. Obviously, seemed to relish the step up in trip, but was it a fairly run 3-mile race, do you think?
No, I think he had it his way. It was a controlled pace. He sat up there. He obviously, Imperial Aura took him on, but Imperial Aura cut out quickly in the straight. Clan de Zobo was beaten 10 lengths, so he was one of the Nichols camp who didn't turn up. It was a good performance by Eldorado Allen, but he beat Royal Pagaille on reasonable ground, good to soft ground. He beat him 2 lengths, so I think with the pace they went, you wouldn't be running scared of me. 16-1 for the Ryanair, he's 25 for the Gold Cup. There's every chance they could go for the Gold Cup. Would it be looking like it's an open race this year? That was the impression I would have got from the Tizzer team on the day. Owners, everyone maybe just leaning towards that way. But he has the options, but to say he's a serious threat in either, you couldn't really. He's a little bit like Conflated. He got the run of the race, is a very good horse, but mightn't just be able to cut the mustard at the top level.
Yeah, I think I'd concur with those thoughts, Barry. Tony, he's currently 16-1 for the Ryanair, and as Barry's touched upon, a bigger price for the Gold Cup. But I think if he's looking to, I'm not sure what are your views on where he might go, and where do you think he'd be best placed at this stage now after that performance?
Like Barry said, I think the way the race was run and the ground probably emphasised speed, and he was well positioned. In general, though, I do like horses like with his profile stepping up and trip. They haven't got as many miles in the clock as some of the Gold Cup types that have been around for years. Like there is a reason why it's very hard to win a second Gold Cup, or especially win a Gold Cup when you've already been beaten in one. And in general, I would tend to be against those horses, which is an interesting spot because the favourites in exactly that position this year. But yeah, probably more of a Ryanair type. Just on Clan de Zobo, aside from the Paul Nicholls stable form, like the King George was a really attritional race just this past December. Like I don't think Asterion Forlange has probably recoiled a little bit from it. Maybe Clan de Zobo too. I know Mr. Fisher has come out and won out of it, but he was kind of down the field and wasn't involved in the main thrust of it, I suppose. It's just something to bear in mind. Like it might have taken those horses a little bit of time to get over it with the pace that Manel Indo and Frodon went. And of course, Frodon again disappointing in there, and Manel Indo back on track. But yeah, those that were involved seem to be disappointing a bit more so after rather than improving on it.
Yeah, angle I hadn't even thought about, but you're right actually when you sort of dissect the form like that. Barry, let's focus in on Funambule Sivola. Continues the really good run of form for the Venetia Williams yard. Not a weekend, not a big Saturday goes by without seeing Venetia in the winners enclosure with Charlie Deutsch. It's actually incredible. This horse now being talked about as sort of a big price each way shot potentially for the champion chase, and he has got that bit of form with Shishkin. Do you think you could get any closer to him in a championship 2-mile race?
He's definitely an improving type, and it was a good performance. He's only 7-year-old, so I think all directions, everything is going the right way for him. But he was getting £6 off Geraghty and beat him 2 lengths. So I think he would need to be better than that to trouble the main players in the champion chase. He could have got involved in maybe last year's race, but I don't think it's good enough for what we're looking at for this season.
I just ask a quick question on his jumping, because I mean, we focus in on horses jumping a lot, but I mean, he takes some liberties. He doesn't get very high, does he? Is it, if you're right, when Charlie's riding him, is that as scary? Is that a sort of terrifying ride, or does it actually feel very sort of slick when you're actually riding a race when a horse jumps like that?
Well, it can be a bit too slick at times, but he was very quick for a horse that got in so tight at the last, and I'd say the top of the fences was rubbing the soles of Charlie's boots. But no, he seems to be very measured. So he knows what he's doing. He doesn't seem to. I think he knows the fine line between what might turn him over and what is, he can get away with. So no, I think he has a good technique, but it is rapid.
Yeah, rapid is the right word. Let's Barry, let's stick with you and focus in on the Betfair Hurdle. Fair bit of talk beforehand about maybe it not being the race that it has been over the last few years in terms of quality and depth, and obviously a slight lack of runners and a bit of an outsider winning it. So for me, I was a touch disappointed after the race, but I think there's probably some takeaways from further down the field when you look a bit deeper into it.
Well, I thought the winner did well. It wasn't ran at an end-to-end gallop, so it was, for a race of its type and its nature, it was probably steady enough, which suited the winner. He had a good bit of pace, he quickened well, very untidy at the last, and would have cost most horses, so I think he did well to win. I like to move it, would have appreciated a much better pace. He stays really well. It was a good step up on his Ascot run, which is obviously a compliment to John Bonney. Was 14 lengths behind him. I thought he ran really well, so he'll be better for a better gallop. I thought for Street, he also, coming from off the pace, not ideal. He ran a good race too. The novices, I think, did well. Napper's Hill was well off the pace. He struggled early on the straight, kept going well. He was only beaten 6 lengths. He beat Stage Star in a bumper in Ascot on soft ground, and I just wonder, could he maybe be a Coral Cup horse? Stepping up and trip should suit him. Okay, good few takeaways from the Betfair Hurdle. Maybe not as disappointing as it first looked on paper from my point of view. Let's move over to Ireland, Tony, and focus in on some of the horses over there that might have fallen under the radar a little bit because of all the attention being over in England, mainly at the weekend anyway. Mare's Chase, Elimay back on track. Good to see her back in the winners enclosure. She's now 5-1 for the Mare's Chase. What did you make of her performance at the weekend?
Yeah, I suppose the most interesting part about this was the application of the headgear, the cheek pieces. I talked a little bit about this last week, that Willie Mullins tends to use them a little bit more. I think the rationale behind her was to get her jumping a little bit better. She had been struggled a little bit at Fairyhouse against Mount Ida. I think she jumped better here, but the issue here is not so much the cheek pieces. He could probably do it, I don't know, giving her extensions or something, putting another couple of inches on her. It's just the size. It still just looks an effort for her, but yeah, she jumped a little bit better. But I was talking about the stats last week about the headgear and things like that. So I had a look just at the last 2 seasons, UK and Ireland, Willie Mullins putting on first time headgear, first time tongue ties. So the cheek pieces and the hood and the blinkers, with blinkers basically a negative from a very small sample. Cheek pieces, he's kind of 5 from 17 in first time cheek pieces. With the hood, he's 8 from 38. But the one that stands out is the tongue tie. He's 17 from 56 with it, a 30% strike rate, 50% of them placings, positive to back. You'd be making money for just backing them flat. So I'm just very interested to see what he does at Cheltenham with this type of stuff. He did it last year with Allaho and the Ryanair. I don't know if that was expected, the tongue tie going on. He's looked a different horse since then, at least a lot more consistent. And even he was able to run to a decent level on his first start back. So that'll be something to watch out for at the big meeting. What he's going to do with, just messing around a bit. It definitely seems to be a little bit of a change in MO from what he was doing 3 or 4 years ago.
Interesting. Do you think that's come from anyone or anything in particular, Tony, in your knowledge, or do you think that's just sort of evolving as a trainer even at his age and experience?
Well, I think all of these things are useful. I think Gordon Elliott might have led the way a little bit with this. He would throw little tongue ties and cheek pieces and hoods on horses there. I think there was one Cheltenham, he had great success with it. He got Mengli Khan, came back to form in the Triumph, and he had a horse run second in the Dawn Run. Barrett had kind of been out of form. He might have won a Coral Cup with, fiddling around with. It's just small incremental little things. So I'm sure Willie Mullen said, well, I might try a few things as well, and it does seem to be working. Whereas previously, it was something he just wasn't inclined to do.
Interesting. And just final point on Elimay, Tony, would you have any interest in her at 5-1 for the Mares Chase at this point?
Yeah, she's okay. I haven't really gone into the race in an awful lot of depth. I just would still worry about her jumping. Although her form training with Colreevy, even though she was getting weight, is still an excellent piece of form, and she has jumped fine at Cheltenham. She would have a massive experience edge in chases over the favourite, the stablemate Concertista. So yeah, I wouldn't knock anyone for that type of price. It'd just be interesting to see what turns up in that race. Is put the kettle on, going to get back on track for it. I'm a big fan of Mount Ida. Just not sure that this race will suit her.
You love her. You're always dropping her in.
Yeah, certain type of race though.
Yeah, okay, fair. Barry, let's focus in on Journey with Me, who continued his unbeaten run, but in quite unspectacular fashion at the weekend at Naas. He's currently 5-1 for the Ballymore. It's not many horses win a race in preparation for Cheltenham and go unchanged by the bookmakers. So, in my opinion, that felt like all you need to know about his performance. The fact that nobody even changed his price after he won. Ooh. Was it that underwhelming from your point of view too?
You'd have to think so. It was more workmanlike than you would have expected. They tried dropping him in, but the pace wasn't great, and he jumped his way to the front. But he had to work to beat Choice of Words. So Choice of Words was 2 lengths behind Daily Tiger in Limerick on his previous run, and prior to that was 21 lengths behind Party Central in Punchestown. So that isn't exactly vintage form for what you'd want to be having with a horse going into the Ballymore. So I think he'd have to be an awful lot better than this performance to be involved, let alone to be 5-1.
Yeah, 5-1 seems very short indeed. No wonder he's unchanged, really. And Tony, just finally before we move on, we are actually going to have a good deep dive into the Champion Hurdle in a minute, so stay tuned for that, everyone. But before we do, just picking up a few other crumbs from Ireland, what other horses caught your fancy? I know you wanted to mention the JP McManus horse Brazil, who won at the weekend as well, and a couple of other takeaways from that race.
Yeah, maybe start just with the Punchestown Grand National Trial on Sunday. That Duty won it, and Cocoa Beach was one that also ran very well. So that's a big pointer to the Thyestes Chase for McGoran. Both of those were well beaten in that race. It was running a very good gallop, produced a good time. So the fact that horses are coming from down the field out to win competitive races is probably a very good sign that that's a strong piece of form. I thought there was actually something very interesting Eddie O'Leary said in the paper just previewing this race. He said that the ground in Goran was too fast for both of those horses. Now, that'll be a first, that the ground in Goran was too fast for any horse, but I do find that interesting for Longhouse Poet. I mentioned him for the Grand National a couple of weeks ago. I think that's really encouraging that he has gone on decent ground, and also the other, I think, horse that we were talking about in that race is Geraghty at 10. So I thought that was interesting. Like Barry, it was a little bit underwhelmed by Journey with Me. That early pace was particularly steady. He's got a bit of a Hollow Games Ginto thing going on, where he's been very workmanlike of steady paces, but you're talking about a horse that's 4-5-1 for a Ballymore. You'd like a little bit more wow factor about him to be taking a price like that. He was only coming out a very similar time, just comparing the same parts of the course that they raced over meet and greet in the maiden hurdle, and he was the best of the other hurdle races on the card time wise. Although it was difficult to compare because they took out 4 hurdles in that race. Yeah, as regards Cheltenham, another interesting thing might be this sort of, I don't know, second class of Irish juvenile hurdlers. Now we have the idea that the few at the top are very good, Vauban and Pied Piper, but these ones that are going for the Fred Winter are also shaping up to be quite a good bunch. I think Brazil is not certain to go that route. They've talked about staying at home with him because he likes a bit of soft ground. He was very impressive in Naas on Saturday, allowing that a few of the others didn't really turn up. I'd say Ben Siegel didn't really handle the ground. I think he bled as well. Fee over-raced a bit. But yeah, that was a very good performance. But he also had an interesting race, juvenile maiden hurdle at Fairyhouse last Wednesday. Paul Nolan's horse won at HMSC horse. And interestingly enough, like Brazil, he's still a full horse apparently. So I don't know. Are Boodle still sponsoring the Fred Winter? Maybe Coolmore need to be sponsoring for National Hunt Sires because both Brazil and HMSC horse, ex-Ballydoyle horse, are still cold. So that's a kind of a weird one. I don't know why they're still intact. But anyway, I actually thought the eye catcher of that race was the second Global Export. Trimby Gavin Cromwell, he came from further back than ideal, made a bad mistake at the second last, was closing all the way to the line. And just something with Gavin Cromwell, he hasn't been among the winners recently. Just as of, when we get this here, as of Saturday, he'd gone 54 runners without a winner. Last winner was back on January 22nd. Now this happened last year. They kind of had a poor Dublin Racing Festival, but like Fanilia flopped completely and then went on to win the Albert Bartlett afterwards. They did comment at the time that the horse was sick. I don't think there's been anything words to that effect about this time round. Of course, it's hard for Irish yards to be in form at the minute because Willie Mullins just seems to be winning everything. So it really is like, and some of the horses he's winning with, I think I've taken on about 4 of his in the last week. I think I've had 4 quite decent bets. I think I've backed 3 or 4 seconds and they're all beating him at 5 or 6 lengths. So you think you're doing okay. Just good. Can't have his there, but he's just in such good order and he's getting wins out of the likes of Dulcita and things like that. So that's pretty good. But yeah, Gavin Cromwell, I wonder is the dip going to be followed by him coming back to form? That Global Export would he'd have the run style that would suit the Fred Winter. Drop him out, come late, and I'd say a bit of nice ground might suit him as well. So yeah, they were some of the less obvious performances. Also Ciel the Niege, he's been an absolute revelation since going over fences. Another one where Willie Mullins stuck the headgear on to kind of sharpen him up. Very frustrating horse over hurdles, but has been really good over fences. Jumps well, travels well, doesn't like to be in front too soon. Coped fine with the drop to 2 miles and what was really testing ground at Punchestown on Sunday. So I don't know where they're going with him. He's entered in the Arkle, I think, maybe more the handicap route. But yeah, have to be impressed with what he's done in his 3 chase starts.
It is competition time. If you want to be in with a chance of winning one of these, this is the branded off the fence beanie hat to keep you warm this winter, then all you have to do is comment win below and we're going to pick out 5 winners before next week's show and we'll be sending those 5 one of these fetching beanie caps. And let's stick with Cheltenham chat then, because let's move on now to going for a sort of a deep dive, we'll call it, into the Champion Hurdle. We're going to be doing this from now with the championship races on the show in the weeks leading up to the Cheltenham Festival, sort of dissecting the big races and hopefully bringing you a few different angles. We're starting with a tricky one, given the fact that Honeysuckle continues on her unbeaten march, and a lot of people think it's as simple as that. Honeysuckle just wins, and it may well be, but of course we've got the added sort of curveball of Appreciate It coming back off this very long break after bolting up in the Supreme. We haven't seen him since. We've got loads of other options in there elsewhere at bigger prices to potentially fill the places. So Tony, it's over to you. Champion Hurdle, is it as simple as Honeysuckle just wins? And if it's not as simple as that, then give us some other options, please.
Yeah, it probably is. I haven't had a bet here. I had a look at it last week. The reason I had a look at it was because Sharjah came out. I actually had in my head I would have liked to back Sharjah place only or without the favourite because I thought he was a highly likely horse to place. But now we've taken him out, it becomes more open in behind if you want to do some without or place betting. Yeah, Honeysuckle. Sure, obviously if she's at her best, she will win. Getting the allowance, things like that. I read a few people cribbing her head carriage at Leopardstown last week. I didn't see that at the time. I went back and had a look. Yeah, it's there a bit. There's a little bit of a wonky head carriage there. Her finishing isn't wonderful. Finishing effort isn't as brilliant as it was last year. I don't know what you think about it, Vanessa or Barry. I suppose you could say that, look at her overall profile, you wouldn't be too worried about it, but she has a bit of a name of being obstreperous in the preliminaries and been a little bit difficult. I can see it. It wouldn't be a massively strong opinion. What did you think, Vanessa, of her not call her attitude, but finishing effort?
My view on this, and it did get, I think, a few people kind of really disagreed and then got stuck into a bit about it. My view was just that if you watch back how she gallops from the back of the last to the line at Cheltenham, she's definitely carrying her head differently to how she was at Leopardstown. And at her price, and she's such a short price, and she's got this unbeaten record, of course we're trying to look for like the tiniest of holes, and for me that was potentially one of the holes. Just the way in which she carries her head, I just thought she looked a fraction awkward. I'm not saying she's not going to win a champion hurdle, but I just think that when she's such a shorter price, you start to look for these things, and that was definitely something on the day and latterly I thought was a small negative against her. That was all. Just a small red flag to bear in mind going forward. But Barry, I think you have very differing thoughts to me on that.
Yeah, it's something I wouldn't worry about personally. She went for her race early in the Hatton's Grace, and she would have pulled up a little bit in front as a result, and she went for a race early again in Leopardstown. You have a long straight in Leopardstown, so she kicked off before the turn in, lengthened early, then let her pop the last, which is the right thing to do. But by just taking the foot off the gas and losing that bit of momentum, you have to stoke her back up again. Whereas last year on the champion hurdle, she crept into a nice position, she winged the second last, challenged into the straight, quickened on the run to the last, flew the last, landed running, and away she went. So I think that little drop in momentum, jumping the last in Leopardstown, she has to stoke her up to go again. And the mare is waiting for company. She's not pulling up, she's not throwing in the towel. She's looking for a bit of company because she's out there on her own for the length of the straight. So no, I think Cheltenham probably suits her better, and especially in a race like the champion hurdle, you're going to swing in, one hurdle to jump, and it's a reasonably short run from the turn into the last, so it's just turn in, press the button, all guns blazing down for the last, and she'll be flying it and up the hill. So no, I wouldn't see any real issue with her or in that, or I don't think she will have an issue if she lines up in the form that she's been shown in the champion hurdle. She's going to be very hard to beat, obviously. Of the race itself, I think Appreciated is a quality horse and has the potential, but the lack of experience, the lack of a recent run, albeit the lack of a recent run, shouldn't be a major concern coming from the Willie Mullins camp, presuming they have him fit. But he's a quality horse. I mentioned it before, how his time is only 2 seconds slower, his supreme time, than the champion hurdle, and that's a big run for a novice, especially with how much the ground would have dried between the first race and the champion hurdle. It's about 2 hours, and you wouldn't believe it unless you're riding around Cheltenham to know how much that ground actually dries. So I think that was a perfect trial for a champion hurdle, that run. Epitant's performance at Christmas I thought was very good at the time. Obviously Glory and Fortune franked it at the weekend, but just how she jumped and how she travelled, from the last to the line she wasn't as impressive as you would have liked, but she ran with the choke out a little bit through the race. But I thought if you stopped the race at the second last, she was skating away at that point. So I think she has a big chance and is probably a good each-way bet. Hard to see her beat Honeysuckle, but I definitely I'd see her in the first three, definitely.
Okay, and Tony, who do you think could get... Actually, a question for you, Tony, before we sort of go for a tip from you as such. Given what Barry's just said on my points on Sunday Honeysuckle and what you've said as well, how can the field get her beat? The field as a collective, how could they get Honeysuckle beat? What do you think their best chance of getting her beat is as a collective against her?
Hoping that Henry de Bromhead hasn't come back to form, I'd say
right.
Part of it. But that's right. Like we're now 6 weeks, 7-8 weeks into this now.
Yeah.
So it's not ideal. It's as long as a bad run as I remember for him in recent years. So that's a possibility. She can still underperform and win. Barry was telling me this morning, he or just before the show there, that Boover there was a very comfortable winner of his second champion hurdle, but I wouldn't think that was at him at its absolute peak performance there. And she could still be able to win, and she's probably similar. Appreciated is an interesting one. I know what Barry's saying about fitness and all that, but fitness in a maiden hurdle of 600 days off, and fitness when everything else is starting back, is one thing. But fitness in a champion hurdle when a lot of these will have had 2 or 3 runs, to me is different. And also, like, he has had problems. Like, that's the reason why he's back over hurdles. He's had this problem, what was it, just prior to Christmas, where he was ruled out of chasing for the season. I didn't expect them to run at Leopardstown. I never thought they were going to take on Honeysuckle for the first run back. That would be pointless wait to Cheltenham. But I am a little surprised that they're not running them this weekend in Goran, because it would look like a fairly... the entries aren't out yet, and people will be able to see the entries by the time this comes out. But I can't imagine it's going to be much of a race. There just aren't the quality 2-mile Irish hurdlers, the real depth to them there. Now, what are you looking at? Something maybe like Durasso running in it. Some of these 5-year-olds, Quilixios, Tehupu. He'd really want to be beating them even under a penalty. So I was a little bit surprised by that. I would fully concur with Barry that Epatante is interesting, and I think she's probably a little bit underrated. She improved a lot from Newcastle to Kempton to Maye, even though maybe she didn't win that far in Kempton, but I think there's a very good reason for that. The internal sectionals of that race suggest that she was going very hard in the second and third quarter of that race, comparing it to the novice hurdle and the other races over the course and distance. Like, there were hurdles there between hurdles where she was covering the ground 1.5 seconds, 2 seconds faster than the horse in the novice hurdle. Like, 7, 8, 10 lengths at a time faster. Like, it's very hard to be impressive when you're running that much faster than those horses on the same ground conditions. And also, I don't think she's a horse that likes being in front for all that long. She's always best ridden with a bit of restraint. With Not So Sleepy being a bit reluctant to line up, that kind of went against her. So I think that performance is an awful lot more impressive maybe than it looks. And obviously it's been franked by the runner-up. Different ride at Cheltenham. Nicky Henderson very positive, bolting about her. She's back jumping well, seems to sort that out. I would say she'll be hard to knock out of the first 3. She's third favourite. She might be an interesting without the favourite bet, because I'm not really in love with Appreciated. Of the others, I suppose you're getting into the 5-year-olds after that. Zanahere's a hard one to know. I thought he ran really well at Christmas. The last day not so good, but there's a big reason why he wouldn't have run so well. An awful mistake at the first. You don't know what harm that's done. And that's another one as well. Like, can you really rate Honeysuckle off his performance? I'm not sure you can, because there would be a question of whether he's run to form. Has he done something to him at the first? Like, he should be beating Echoes and Rain further than he actually did. But maybe the interesting one there of the former juveniles is the horse that was second in the Triumph, Adagio. Like, on last season's form, you would say he's below the very best, but he had a wind operation over the summer, and he put up a much improved performance in the Greatwood. Ran really well in that, and has an excellent kind of course record. Now, he has had a setback since, but I believe he was thinking about running him in the Betfair at the weekend, and they took him out, and they're going to the Kingwell on Saturday. Not an easy race necessarily with Goshen under his kind of suitable conditions, and Mon Moral on a retrieval mission, but you'd like to think he'd be winning that. He's not the worst one at a price. They were the 2 I was interested in. I haven't done anything yet as such, but Epatante and Adagio would be the 2 that would interest me most.
Yeah, I think I would concur with that. I liked Adagio as well, and someone messaged or tweeted quite early on in this season of Off the Fence, saying that they backed Adagio mad big prices to fill the frame in the champion hurdle. So good luck if you're still watching the show. Hopefully you are. Good luck to you with your betting slip. So Adagio at a big price, Epatante at a big-ish price, and Barry, is Epatante the only way you'd be advising people to go play it at this point?
I think so, yeah. You can make case for Quilixios or Tipu or those, and even Adagio, I do like him, but I think he has to make a big step forward in what he's done. So no, Epatante, she's a champion hurdle winner. I think she's in better shape this year on that Kempton run than she was last year. So I'd see her being closer to Honeysuckle, and no, definitely she's a good each way bet.
Barry, if you could ride one champion hurdle race again from your past, which one would you pick? Which one was your best ever?
Which one? Well, Epitaph will be last one. Was the only one I remember. The others are too long ago.
Recency bias, like it. Right, well, that covers the champion hurdle then. Good few weeks still to go. We will, of course, be still discussing it as things unfold over the next couple of weeks leading up to that first day of the festival. Cannot wait myself. One of the best races of the week for me. Let's move on. Quick look ahead to the week ahead. We've already touched on the Kingwell, but let's focus in at Ascot. I suppose the entries came out today for the Betfair Ascot Chase. You've got Fakir Duderi's in there, Dashel Drasher back over fences, St Calvados lost in translation on a retrieval mission, Mr Fisher as well, plenty in there. Barry, if all of those tip up, this will be a really competitive race.
No, very competitive race, and 7 of the 8 runners are rated within £6 of each other. So St Calvados is there at the head of the market, but Tony makes a very good point as regards the King George form. So it'll be interesting to see how he bounces back, and then you take into account Paul Nicholls' horse's form as well. So that has to put a question mark over him. But on the book, on his run there, and his second to Min in the Ryanair 2 years ago, which I think he was unlucky not to win. So that is strong form. He probably has the strongest recent form with that King George win. Mr Fisher, very good horse. I just have a question mark about him at grade 1 level. I think he's a very good horse, just slightly down in grade, as he showed in Kempton last time on a track that really suits him, but I'm not sure Ascot, it just could be a little bit stiff for him. Fernand Ryle, Venetia's horse, who was second to Phoenix Way, good run there. He is only a 6-year-old, I think, coming along. So he's 49 behind Factory. He's 7-year-old now, 6-year-old, 49 behind Factory in the Ryanair last year. But he's a horse on the up. On his rating, he would have a chance. Dasher Drassel, who loves it round Ascot, you'd have to respect him, but I think it's a better race this year than last year. Lost in Translation and Waiting Patiently, I think, are two horses who are once upon a time at this stage. It's hard to make cases for what they've been doing recently. And even the outside of the field, 2 for Gold, who was a winner in Lingfield recently, he has to have a squeak. So it's a very competitive race. Factor de Ries on his Ryanair run last year, he was the best of the rest behind Allaho. He loves soft ground. He'd be the one for me, I think.
Okay, and Tony, any other business from you to cover? Anything else that's caught your eye at this early stage for the next few days, jump racing?
No, I think Barry's covered St Calvados very well. I would have those concerns. Also, decent race at Clonmel on Thursday there. There's a 3 mile novice hurdle. Chantress is entered, Hi Ho Phoenix, Johnny McWee is also entered, he's not going to run. And then at the weekend in Ireland there is going to be some decent races, the Red Mills races at Goran, and I think there's 3 greater races at Navan on Sunday. So yeah, plenty of good stuff over the weekend.
Plenty to get stuck into, and we of course will be dissecting it all this time next week. Before we go, let's leave with tracker time. I had a winner for my tracker horses. Govan won at the weekend. Absolutely delighted. Barry, who's your tracker horse from the last 7 days, please?
Yeah, Ebazari, who was second to Brazil, or third side to Brazil in Naas, had beaten Adamantly Chosen early in the season on heavy ground, but I think he moves like a horse who wants better ground, very quick and slick over the last 2. So I think one to keep an eye on, maybe in a handicap on nice ground. Probably won't get into the Fred Winter on this run, but will be worth following the handicap, I think.
Okay, and Tony, please, your tracker horse?
Yeah, I like the run of Alco Rouge at Punchestown on Sunday in the Novice Chase. It was a proper test at 2 miles. He went forward with 3 that had proven form, even come from handicap: Ciel, the Niege, Fire Attack and Take All. And he was coming off a break, and a really quite a dismal run on his return. He cut out at the same track, 2.5 mile race around halfway. A very disappointing effort for him. But his jumping stood up really well against those horses despite coming off a break. He was banged there at the second last, bit of a mistake, probably blew up a little bit, and didn't fully see it out. So he's an interesting one. Not the biggest surprise that he would be a better chaser than hurdler. He's a massive horse. I'm a big fan of this trainer, Tom Gibney. I think he's really good at what he does. But his horses have been out of form. He commented on this the winner of Punchestown Must Be Obeyed in mid-January. He said horses just haven't really been going that well. Maybe they're back on the right road now, and this horse, like a beginner's chase over 2 miles in soft ground, really should be a formality on this run, and it should hopefully pick up the winning thread again soon.
Okay, Alco Rouge for Tony. For me, Lord Baddesley finished 4th in the Betfair hurdle for Chris Gordon at a huge price. Nick Schofield on board. He's £1 out the weights. He did really well to finish where he did from where he came from throughout the race. And if they just lower their sights just a little bit, he can take any handicap he likes, really. 2.5 miles will suit him as well. So he won't be missed in the market like he was on Saturday. I think he went off about 6 to 1. He won't go off that price again, but you might get some sort of a price about him. So yeah, tracker time done and dusted, everyone. I think that about wraps up the show. Thanks very much as always, Barry and Tony. Thank you very much for watching. That was Off the Fence.